Okay, I think we've just passed the hour, so I wanted to get this started. I want to welcome everyone to this first WWP webinar in English. It is the first one we're doing in this platform, so bear with us if there are any technological glitches. My name is Magnus Lindelow. I'm the coordinator for the Human Development Program in Brazil, and I'll be the moderator for this session today, which will run about 70 minutes in total. For those of you who are not aware or haven't heard of the WWP, WWP stands for the Brazil Learning Initiative for a World Without Poverty. It's an initiative that was launched about a year ago with the aim of stimulating a knowledge exchange on social protection issues and learning from Brazil's experience in this area. Today's webinar is going to be focused on Brazil's unified registry for social programs, or the Cadastro Único, as it's known here. So we have two participants in today's session. The presenter today is Joana Mostafa, who is a director responsible for the Unified Registry in the Ministry of Social Development and Fight Against Hunger in Brazil. She's also a researcher at the Institute for Applied Economic Research in Brazil, and she'll talk for about 40 minutes or so and explaining the details of the Unified Registry and how it works. We will then have about 10 minutes of comments from Margaret Grosh, who I think is by now a household name in social protection circles. She is currently the practice manager responsible for social protection in Latin America and Caribbean region, and has, as many of you know, I'm sure, published extensively on social protection issues globally and in Latin America. I'm going to hand over the word to Joana, and as I do that, I want to encourage you to check out the chat on the WebEx platform, and there'll maybe some messages from the WWP team, and you can also pose questions that we will then try to address in the session after Margaret's comments. So check out the chat and feel free to weigh in with comments and questions along the way, and we'll try to squeeze in as many questions as we can towards the end of the session. So I will then move out of this chair and Joana will move in.
Okay. I hope everyone is listening to us right now. It's a pleasure to be here again, now in English. Reaching for more people, I think this platform is a great advancement. And I'll start basically trying to give you some idea of what we built in Brazil and what is its main characteristics. It's a unified registry for social programs. And I'll start by saying that it came to complete some systems and registries that we already had in place in Brazil. A lot of databases and systems regarding universal policies that in Brazil are basically health and education policies. We had already a very important pillar of social protection, which is the classical contributive social security, pensions, and survivor benefits policies. They also had databases and systems of their own. And the Unified Registry came to complete this spectrum of policies. And what it does is it unifies many benefits, many target populations under one database. So basically today, the Cadastro Único is the main instrument used by Brazil to select low-income families and include them in social programs. The database today is 26.6 million families, representing 80 million people. Practically half of Brazil's population is in this database. It's not only a database, it's also a network of people and institutions that updates and includes over 1.3 million families across Brazil every month. So just here is just to illustrate, as if before you had isolated policies and their databases, now they're all integrated into one database. And with that, you can see all kinds of phenomena. You can see exclusion errors of policies, which would be if you have, because our registry is a census of the population up to half a minimum salary per person, you can see how some programs do not reach these people or families within that threshold. And you can also see other phenomena of inclusion errors. So it is very useful for, and also, of course, duplicity or complementarity as you want to set up your social protection spectrum of policies. You can see those things if you have one unified registry. So why unifying? For us, it was a question, because we are so big in terms of population and territory, it was a question of eliminating duplication of efforts to register, to verify identity and income, and to update the information. For us, it was actually an economy of scale. As I said, it allows exclusion errors to be identified. It allows inclusion errors to be identified. It makes it easier to eliminate duplicated delivery of benefits and services. And in short, it is really economies of scale, activities that may seem too costly or technically individually make sense, or costly technically as well. They, when applied in a large scale to various programs, they make sense. So investments in updating, automating, and checking data, contracting experts to analyze the data. One expert is the same guy that will analyze 10,000 registries or 1 million registries. So you have a lot of economies of scale. What is the threshold? What is the targeted population of our registry in the case of Brazil? Households with a monthly family income of up to half the minimum wage per person, or households with higher incomes if their admission to the registry is linked to having been selected or participating in social programs or services. So we admit some families out of this threshold if they are linked to other programs. But there is a basic contradiction that we have to deal daily, and it is that despite existing for the purpose of informing programs, of course the registry is made for that, it cannot be designed accounting only for the threshold or eligibility criteria of a set of fixed programs, because they change constantly and rely on the registry for their expansion or contraction. In other words, the registry also has a purpose of planning, monitoring, and evaluation. There is also this function, and to comply with that function, you can't have only the threshold, or you can't collect only the data that those programs need. And also, because although they exist for the purpose of informing programs, they cannot fulfill all of one program's data needs, because it serves so many masters. That's what I mean with that is that the one registry serves many programs. So it can't collect the data that every program needs and all the data that every program needs. So it's really hard to deal with those contradictions in our daily functions. Okay, so basically the Unified Registry of Brazil serves for eligibility analysis of programs, verification of program access criteria, levels of vulnerability, location of the families, etc. Prioritization analysis, maybe you want to organize a queue based on registry data. It's not that you need to have a specific criteria, but you can organize the queue. Also, you can use it for the purpose of planning programs and formulating social policy. Also, you can use it for monitoring and evaluating the same programs that use Cadastro Único. For us, it was a history, really, no registry begins from zero. Every registry, everywhere there is already a registry of beneficiaries of some sort of program. So, and the unified idea comes really when there are a multiplicity of programs and you feel the necessity of coordinating these things. So it wasn't different with us. Cadastro Único came into place by a combination of 5 income transfer programs for poor households under a unified program called Bolsa Família program, which is very well known as well. And there was a clear political goal to expand it to all the poor. That's important. So in our case, it's not only a pool of beneficiary databases. It's also a database which was already set to include all the poor families in Brazil and be like a census, more or less like a census of this population. What is the Unified Registry and how did we get here? Well, this is a little bit of the story of the Cadastro Único. We already have by now, 15 years of existence, 14 years of existence. In the beginning, it was just really formal existence in law, which is Brazil has a lot of those constructions. It constructs things first in law and then after it comes into place. So in 2003, when there was this the political decision to actually launch Bolsa Família program and unified all these 5 programs that were there before, the Cadastro Único really started to grow strongly. In 2005, after a very hard time in 2004 with the media that we had to deal with the acceptance of Bolsa Família program, which is a CCT, and also with the poor database that we had, because those 5 programs had, before Bolsa Família, had very bad quality databases. So in 2004, we were very much attacked by I hope everyone is hearing me. So then in 2005, we began very much thinking on how to clean the database, how to make it with a better quality, and how to put in place really financial incentives to create and improve the quality of data that were collected in the local governments, how to engage municipalities. So there was municipalities, they signed the terms of accession to the program and to Cadastro Único, to Programa Bolsa Família, and there was our first database cross-check with formal labor income databases in Brazil. From 2006 to 2009, we really did a large-scale legislative and normative review. We started to do online checks against the Brazilian Taxpayers Registry, just for the purpose of better identity check, the identity of the purpose, not the of the person, not to check the income, okay? But still, to check identity is very important, not to have a duplicity of people in your database. And we started to construct a new questionnaire and software for the Cadastro Único. And finally, in a new version of Cadastro Único in 2010 was launched, and it was only really consolidated by 2013. So you can see that at least for 12 years, it is a story of consolidation and trying to bring in quality of data so that it can be appealing to programs to use Cadastro Único. So this is just the form, the front of our form, the questionnaire. It's 40 questions about households and families, 60 questions about documents, schooling, work, and income. So it's a long questionnaire. You can see it's 100 questions. And basically all concepts are used in official statistics. They are alike. They're just like the official statistics concepts of every question. But we have some other questions that are specific to identify vulnerabilities of this population to inform policies that are very necessary. So a little bit here of how our database is nowadays. 50% of the registries meaning 50% of the families registered in Cadastro Único have an income of up to $1.25 a day per person and are extremely poor. 16% are what we call poor, from 125 to 50, and then there's 21%, which is what we call low income, which is from the threshold of poor to half a minimum salary per person. And then above half a minimum salary is 13% to serve other programs that also that have eligibility criteria a little bit further away from the half minimum salary criteria. Today, it reflects a lot of what our population is really, 20%, 22% rural, and 78% urban. That's exactly what the whole population is in Brazil. Households, this is a fantastic indicator, one of those collapse indicators that you can build with the registry. For example, households with simultaneous access to public utility services, meaning they have access to electricity, sewage system, solid waste collection, and water distribution network. And as you can see, of course, all of those together, all of those four services together, only 36% of the extremely poor have those services together. So this is one of the things that you can build with that, with the unified registry. Another thing is, this is the map of the beautiful city of Rio de Janeiro, already doing some publicity for our Olympics next year. So this is the city of Rio de Janeiro, and the colors, they reflect the deficit, the housing deficit of households that are registered in Cadastro Único, of course. So the greener the little spots, the more it is with a deficit. And you can contrast that with the housing program that the federal government has, and it's a big program called Minha Casa Minha Vida. You can contrast the spots that have a high deficit and did not receive housing programs. So that's kind of thing that you can do even in terms of territory and micro territories, right? Micro census areas. This is really, really interesting this is also one of the programs that use Cadastro Único, Programa Minha Casa Minha Vida for the poor. How can we ensure data quality? That's a hard question, and we still deal with that. For us, our way of doing things really, and it couldn't be another way. There couldn't be another way because we're so big and so such a large population, and territory-wise as well, very scattered. We decided for the self-declaration of, combined with criminal liability of that person who declares. So for us, everything is self-declared, is unvalidated data. So the head of the household, which is 16 or older, is responsible for information accuracy. And basically, for us, it was also important to inhibit patronage and misconduct by municipal agents, meaning local government agents, and account for high level of informality, of course, of poor populations. Poor populations in Brazil are very much in the informal market, as are in many other countries. So we would hardly get any validated data anyways. Also to inhibit we wanted to make the persons who are declaring liable for what they were declaring, and it creates a rights but also duty approach to your relationship with the state. So this is also a transformation that we want to create in Brazil. It is of utmost importance to update the registries because so many programs use it, and updating means just to have the newest, the most recent vulnerability situation of that family. It's very important. The Brazilian labor market is very dynamic, so we also need to capture all those data, all those changes in vulnerability. Standardized questions underlying the concepts of the 100 questions. So mostly according to the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics, as I said. So that enables quality assurance checks with be it the census data that our Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics does every 10 years, or the annual survey, household survey. Also, it has to be an objective questionnaire, but with that, we struggle with that. As I said, 100 questions is a bit too long, and we know that it was an excitement in the beginning to have a good form, but you can't have everything in there, and the longer the questionnaire, of course, the poorer the info will be. So interviewers are poorly qualified as well, so we have to have that in mind. We tried, it is an ongoing process to qualify the people that work with Cadastro Único in local governments. How else do we ensure quality data? Of course, technological structure is very important. So you can make critiques to data entry, traceability, and identity checks. Incentive policies to standardize information and keep it up to date. We have an incentive, so we decentralize budgets for the local government so that they can face the cost of updating this data. Ongoing stakeholder training. We train people a lot. We train every interviewer, not the federal government, but the federal and the state government. We have a multiplying capacity training. We have distance education. We deal with all that kind of setup, standardized materials. And also register verification. We do annual checks against formal labor and public and private formal labor records, and also pension system records. And also, of course, you have to have clear, standardized, and predefined concepts and procedures all over the place in the whole of Brazil. Monitoring plans for decentralized management. You have to monitor indicators, do action plans, workshops. It's an ongoing process. How is the data flow? In Brazil, management of the unified registry is a shared responsibility of the federal government, the states, and the municipalities. The municipalities are local governments. Inspections are supported by the Brazilian audit system. That's a very important cooperation that we have with them. Cooperation between the level of government consolidates the unified registry as an instrument of the state and not of one single party here and there. Despite being harder to put in place, our decentralized model for us really promotes local institutional capacities, which is also a necessary part of Brazil's democratic consolidation, promotes a system of power balance checks between different parties and levels of government. No one controls the entire process, so that also inhibits undue political appropriation of the benefits that come out of Cadastro Único. So how does it work? Local level municipalities, we have 5,570 municipalities. Data is collected there through a standardized form. It is then, this is not going too well, but it then goes to the central level at night, online to the central level, but at night it is processed so that we check that it is the same exact person that we already have in the database, and it receives the same identity name, the ID, or it's a new person, so I will have to give her a new ID. So that's a check that we do. We could do it online, we're moving to that, but we do it from one day to the other. And then this is in the central level already. This is important here. We contract Caixa, which is a state-owned bank. I think it's the second one in level of deposits. It's a very, very big bank in Brazil. And it has a very, it is important for us because, not because of its IT services as such, but because it has a decentralized also structure that can deal with people in where they are in localities if they need anything regarding, for example, their identity number. Oh, no, I already have a number. No, I'm not like that other person. You thought I was that other person, but I'm not. Those kinds of things. And then after that, Caixa gives the central level, the Ministry of Social Development, where I work. We extract the data from Caixa and we work it in quality monitoring. We do data cross-checks, those kinds of things. Data flow and jurisdiction. Okay, so it comprises all 5,570 local governments, 27 states, which is the total number of states in Brazil, the ministry and Caixa, also the audit network. In 99% of the municipalities, the unified registry is located within the local social assistance secretariat. So we are really a part of the social assistance policy in Brazil. In 60% of those municipalities, registration is carried out at the reference centers for social assistance, which they usually are located in the neighborhoods, everywhere in a city. In 54% of them, of the municipalities, there is also a centralized booth or somewhere that people can go to in the city center. Only 7% of the registries are home visits. That's important. So one way to validate the data really would be for someone in central government to go to the house of people, but in Brazil that's impossible. So what we've done really is to create centers near people in neighborhoods and in city centers that work really on demand. And people self-declare their income, and it has been working well since Bolsa Família is one of the most targeted programs in the world, it's CCTs. So what we've proved is that in our case, at least, it has worked well. Of course, the downside of that is that you have to really work on quality checks afterwards. We have 32,000 permanent interviewers all around Brazil, and more or less 40,000 exclusive collaborators, counting those 32 within that. So, and it is important for us, it's a really real challenge that most have finished only secondary school and are outsourced or temporary workers. We're working on that really hard now so that we can have a better network of workers. So as you have heard, it's a unified registry. It's a single registry for all programs that are selective, that select population, select people based on social demographic data. So nowadays it's 20 nationwide programs and services that use Cadastro Único, and at least 10 local programs and services that we know of. Amongst them are cash transfers, non-cash transfers, labor policies such as rural technical assistance, tax benefits for small enterprises, also education policies, technical courses, prioritization of full-time schooling, priority access to higher education, also some asset policies such as housing, cisterns, and land policies, land distribution policies. So just figuratively here, I've drawn what would be the Unified Registry Database. It has a data entry application, and it has many data access applications, and there is the database after that. Sorry. And it gives information to all user programs, management information systems. So those management information systems access the data of Cadastro Único. Well, what Cadastro Único still is not, and maybe will never be, is that it is different from having an integrated management information system, which would integrate all the benefits that use the registry as an entry point. And that is the analysis that many of the countries that, and as maybe for us it wasn't so much important, now it is beginning to be more important, but many countries also want to know what is the duplicity between programs or complementarity between programs. And for that, you have to have an integrated management information system. It's not only a database, a unified database behind all that. That's just a warning. Okay, so challenges regarding all those user programs, meaning the programs that use Cadastro Único. Although the unifying concept is very appealing, it is also hard to coordinate, very hard. So there is a difficulty in coordinating programs' needs for inclusion of families and updating of records. So I told you it was 26.6 million families. How much time do I still have? Do you know? Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Okay. So it is hard if I was to say 26 million people, 0.6 million people, please go to Cadastro Único now to update your data. My God, we would not, there would not be enough people or doors to knock on. So there is, of course there is, and we work with, we know that we work with 20% deficit of people to attend to all these families, so in local governments. So we know we have to prioritize, and it's hard to coordinate all the program's needs. Who is more important, the program of housing or the program of CCT? That depends on the moment, on what's happening. So there really has to be a preoccupation on governance, really, on coordinating those needs. And also, usually, those needs refer to the same families. There is the same family that receives a CCT, gets a benefit from a CCT, also gets a benefit from a housing program, for example. And so, of course, it makes sense to be coordinated within Cadastro Único. Otherwise, you'll be asking for the same family twice to go update your data, or for them to all the effort that concerns that data has to be coordinated under Cadastro Único. And for the programs to understand that, it's really hard. Inhibit free riders that want to use Cadastro Único out of the threshold of half a minimum salary per person. That's also hard because Cadastro Único has that permission for all programs to link to it. And since it has that permission in law, we, after a law is passed, like 2 months later, I received the information that a new program is using Cadastro Único and is out of our targeted population. It's really hard also to make your threshold be other programs' threshold. It's hard to politically to make people understand that. Otherwise, we'll have a registry of all people in Brazil. We will have a continuous census of people. Okay. Another challenge is to monitor and reduce the incentives each program creates for bad data reporting on behalf of families. You have to monitor every incentive. So one program actually has an incentive to omit a person from the family for some reason. I'm not sure why. And the other program has an incentive, gives an incentive for families to declare their income. And another, so you have to understand all those incentives and analyze the data and see if it's happening, why it is happening, and try to inform programs of that. And also, because Cadastro Único is for everyone, for every program. How the registry is consulted. As I said, the registry is consulted by many. It gives us access to information in many ways, but it basically depends on how the programs relate to their citizens. I mean, their targeted populations. So if a program has to starts with a personal, individual demand, the consultation of the database will also be personal and individual. So the unified registry can be consulted through individual channels, family by family, either or by batch, meaning a list of families, or by integrating the program's management information systems directly with the unified registry, which would be a web service. Examples of this, I'm gonna skip the examples, but there are many. Power companies, for example, there's an electric tariff discount for poor populations that utilize Cadastro Único, and it is an individual search. People call the power companies to get the discount, and the power companies go into a tool to do an individual search and see if the person has all the eligibility criteria to get the discount. Consultation by aggregate demand. If it is a program that selects or prioritizes the targeted population centrally in the central government by the program's administration, the best would be for them to have a monthly extraction from the database or a more frequent extraction of the whole database and do that kind of aggregate analysis and in batch concede to the benefits. It's also available, and we work those extraction out as well with the programs. So a mix of consultation and access strategy is best because really each program has one way to relate to its targeted population. This is just a print of the system, the application that inputs the data in Cadastro Único. So before here is just the summary of the family. And then when you go into the family itself, you see all the members because they're all accounted for in Cadastro Único. They're all registered, and there's data for their work individually, data for their schooling individually, etc. This is another management information system who basically it's a reporting system, a BI system who that we provide for people to consult the data in Cadastro Único. So here we can see how many registries with child labor, trabalho infantil, child labor in Acrelândia, which is a municipality, in Acre, which is a state. And those 39 families that actually have some situation of child labor, if we click on those little presents there, we download a zip file with every family in the list, in the 39 list. So those kinds of things also search data and are very useful. So a summary of our experiences, Brazil's model was very successful for Brazil. The operational model depends greatly on each country's specificities. Are there many selective programs in place already? Does the information need to be updated, or will a simple initial data collection process suffice? Is decentralization possible? Is there a broad and unified civil registration service in place already, so it makes everything easier? The unified registry does not replace, this is also important, a warning that, a caveat, the unified registry does not replace program management systems, a variety of systems to consult the registry, or a management system to integrate programs, which is the higher level, I think, of analysis that could do cross-checks between all programs to analyze overlaps and complementarity. This is me. I'll respond to some of your questions, but please, if you want this presentation, you can receive this presentation by mail. Unfortunately, this technology does not permit us to send you the presentation, but by mail, please access our mail webinar at www.org.br with the name, country, and institution that you are in. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Joana. So I'm going to hand over the word then to Margaret to provide some comments. And Margaret, if you're not unmuted already, please unmute, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. There we talk. That's it. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. So, sorry about that. I was trying to convey the notion that I really am pleased to hear the Brazil story, more so to know that it exists. I think it is a fascinating case. It is a remarkable accomplishment. And it stands, I think, as an example to the dozens of countries that are also working on this. So while Brazil may be the most famous case, it is certainly not the only case. And I think it's very helpful that the WWP initiative enables other countries to learn from this experience and to have some exchange around it. So let me start with the question of what it takes. So Joana's given us a beautiful presentation, and I just want to highlight 3 areas of things it takes to have this kind of unified registry system working. So I think first you can talk about the resources. Joana gave us some numbers for the impressive numbers of staff working on this. She didn't talk so much about the fact that there's physical installations and computers and all of that necessary, outreach vehicles, budget for people to do the outreach work. I think it's very impressive and important to realize how much effort this takes. So she gave the figures of the 20,000 and the 32,000 workers. And the last time I was there, I was on a field trip and looking at this in the field, and thinking of how different it was from, say, 20 years ago when you could visit every country and they would have laughed at the notion of having this kind of capacity installed. So I think the fact that social policy in Brazil can do what it has done rests upon the willingness to make this investment and to build it up gradually, and that's something that other countries would need to take into account. I think a special factor in all of this is the notion that it does take continual work and updating. So this isn't that you go out and do this on a consultancy basis once. It's that to really keep these programs going and to keep the targeting good, you need to have continual updates, and that when you have continual updates household by household, it also depoliticizes the fact of updates. So it's no longer accusing one administration of having not done a good job and then suddenly facing protests by a quarter of people being potentially removed from the register or anything. It's just a piece of daily work. It's just like teachers take attendance in schools, the thing gets updated. So I think one whole thing about what it takes is resources. Another whole area about what it takes is the sort of legalistic infrastructure. So Joana mentioned the notion of having a good civil registry. Having an ID number that can be matched from one database to another database is very critical. Now, in some countries, it is the national ID. In other countries, it's some other imitator of that. But the fact that you can match from one database to another, to another, to another is very important and very powerful and needs to be sought. She spoke a bit less about the data access protocols per se, but she used the terms the network of people and institutions. She talked about how this is an instrument of the state. And I think putting it at that level of generality so that it encompasses all of the different programs and all of the ministries in which the programs fit, and the federal level and the municipal level with the state level in between is really important, because in a lot of countries we do see sort of some kind of tussle over ownership or some kind of less holistic view. And I think of these registries as really being like a chain where they're only as strong as the weakest link. And so to think about all of the different aspects and all of the different people and institutions that need to be involved and making sure that they're all in harmony is important. And that's where the third thing that this all takes comes in. It really takes a lot of political will. So I think Brazil is remarkable. You heard the many-year history, but it really takes taking criticism constructively to make the series of iterative changes that Joana explained to us. And it takes an acknowledgement that we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So now, in 2015, Joana can say, you know, what we had in 2001 or in 2005 wasn't very good. But in 2005, it was what was available, and they were making use of what was there, perfecting it, acknowledging its imperfections, but still using it for good policy. And I think that's where a lot of countries are today, and that seeing that attitude of criticism but constructive improvement is important. And then we get to the whole notion of the value of all these registries and why they really matter. Joana used the same terms that are often used and that we use kind of with abandon, but I really wanted to emphasize a couple of the takes I have on it and that she put to it. So yes, we use registries like this to help focus resources on the neediest, that is to say, to some degree minimize the resources going to the upper end of the income distribution to weed out errors of inclusion. But very important parts of it, and especially of having a single registry rather than individual registries, is to work on the errors of exclusion. So you heard her tell us that we can only do this kind of outreach. It's only effective. We can only get this quality of data if it's for multiple programs at once, because it makes possible to do an investment that program by program would be way prohibitive. And so it improves the quality of social policy all around by getting those economies of scale. And I would stress that everything we know and are learning more and more from the behavioral economics field is about how important transactions costs are to households and how much it matters that we can lower the costs to them to participate in social policy by having the outreach, by getting them 3 or 5 or 8 programs with them only having to do one set of transactions to register, that kind of thing. So I think that's really important. And that this then brings all these policies together around the household. It gives us a much more holistic social policy. So I think one of the things that is going to be fascinating starting now and over coming years is seeing how the policy designs themselves change in reaction to the fact that we can now think about getting all of the policies wrapped around a family at once. We may discover that duplications are not duplications in bad behavior of the household, but that because we couldn't think about policy holistically enough, we created more programs than we needed, and that now those can be reshaped to be more effective. We can think about what the right benefit levels are in total, because if you're reaching households through more than one set of avenues, it may change how we want each one of those to work. And understanding those synergies and fine-tuning policy around those synergies, I think is going to be really a frontier to come in coming years, and one of the most interesting ones. A more standard one, but also one to come, is the notion of, now that we have so much money flowing through a single instrument, the need to keep it ever improving and of high quality is also there, of course, and that will be interesting to see how much further the frontier can be pushed about the quality of data and the cost of management of it and the perfection of that. So those were just a few things I wanted to highlight that I think are particularly interesting about the Brazil case, but in a little broader context, thinking about other countries as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Joana has been nodding here, so I think there is broad agreement on the points that were made, which is good. We've had a lot of questions from the participants. Thank you for that. We've had to select a few, and we'll see if we can find other ways of responding to some of these questions in future events or some other way online. But we're going to try to address at least 3 questions now. I'm going to read them out. I'm going to then let Joana address them, and Margaret, you're free to come in as well if you have anything that you want to add on these respective points. So the 3 questions that we'll focus on in the remainder of the session is the first: how does Brazil deal with people or population groups without permanent addresses, such as migrant or itinerant population groups? The second: is there a grievance system? Can you tell us how it works? And the final question would be: what is the vision for an integrated MIS in Brazil? Are there any plans to develop or working on an integrated MIS? So those are the 3 questions. I'll hand over to Joana. I'll then pass the word to Margaret, and then I'll come back and close the session. Joana, over to you.
Thank you, Magnus. Okay. First, addressing the question of moving populations. Of course, in our case, we don't deal with that so much as in other places. What we have is we have one thing for populations that live on the streets, and they have a hard time on giving addresses, of course. So we have a specific rule for addressing to input address for those populations, and we usually use the address of a central, in the city center, some location where it actually goes to do Cadastro Único. So if it goes to that place, that is the address that will be referred to that person. And so, for example, if we want to send that person a letter for any reason, a mail, we would send that letter to that place, and that place would go after that that population, the people on the streets. Also, we have that same kind of thing with, how do we call ciganos in
Gypsies.
Gypsies. Yes. So those usually they change from place to place, from one camp to the other camp, and to deal with that, we also first we actually incentive local governments to work together so that they don't need to be changing their address all the time. So maybe even if that population is now living in a nearby municipality, the origin municipality would still have them on its own database, on its own population database, and it will deal with that with the needs of those populations. But we also do, since the database is consolidated centrally, when a person moves, for example, it goes to another municipality and it declares, she goes to the city center to declare that she has moved, and automatically with the system, it brings the data, transfers the data to that other municipality. So it's automatic in terms of the exclusion of that family from the original municipality, but it's not automatic in the sense that the person has to go and declare in some other municipality that it has moved. So I wouldn't think that's a good example for people, for countries that actually have moving populations. But that's the two examples that I can think of. Also, regarding the second question about a grievance system, what we have is we have a number of channels for people to communicate with us. And one institutional channel. So we have a telephone number, a central telephone number, a free one, free of charge, that people can anonymously call and do whatever they want in terms of reporting under declaration or fraud. And we would take that and go up to we will take that and go try to understand the exact case, what happened individually. That is hard, as Margaret has pointed out. It takes hard work and a lot of people to, for example, it's 26 million families, so we have like 100,000 cases of those that we have to go after people and to know what happened. So we have that channel of the free of charge telephone number, free of course email. So it's a ministry, centralized ministry channel. But we also have in the municipalities, every social assistance structure in municipalities has to have a participative forum. They need to have that so that they can get the money, the decentralized budget that we offer for them to organize all the registry in the locality. So they need to institute, at least formally, institute a participative forum with three entities, society, government, and local government, and the representative of families. Really, it is hard to set true participative forums everywhere that really work and that really do some surveillance and some that work with independent of the local government. But we have had some very nice, very interesting best practices and good cases to talk about. But still, that's also a tough matter to deal with. And another question that I would address would be the integrated management information system. For now, what we have is an integrated management information system of the programs that our ministry has. So really, it's not an integrated management system. It's one part of it, and it's what we have governance over. So it's still a challenge for us, where we want to encourage that within the federal government. We've been trying to work with that by engaging all the programs into one forum of user programs of Cadastro Único. And for that, we're instituting many things right now, such as we are doing an informative folder every month for all the programs that use Cadastro Único, so that you start creating an identity between them. They have in regards to Cadastro Único, in regards to the data that they need for selecting families, for targeting their programs, they have many, they have issues that are much alike. So we're trying to create that organically, create that group of people and that group of programs that actually relate to each other. That's also a way to go, trying to organize that cooperation and that governance structure for user programs in Cadastro Único. But of course, maybe after that we can, because you have to work the willing of those, the political will of those programs to actually relate to each other. It's very easy working in sectoral ministries to stay in your sector and leave everyone behind. But since Cadastro Único is already a first step for that IMIS, it has that role also of engaging those programs together in regards to what Cadastro Único is today, which is really what it is, collecting data for all of them, and standardizing data and qualifying all that data, but not more than that. What we have to create is really the will to integrate, to have that integrated look over social policies within the government. It's a tough matter as well. All of the questions are really tough, I would say. Thank you so much.
Margaret, anything you want to add?
Well, as Joana said, these are all really tough, and so I'm not even going to try and add to her wisdom on the third question. But I did have a thought or two a bit on the other two questions. On the grievance system, I would just remark that all we're learning from countries is that these grievance systems are very important. They typically aren't the first thing that gets developed. So when you think of the life of building the different components of a good registry system, grievances usually come in after you've got some of the other systems functioning. But one of the things we've learned is that in addition to having a way to take in those complaints, you need to have a really sophisticated back office about what you do about them. So to try and find out what it is that has gone wrong, if anything, or how to provide comfort to the household who is appealing to say, no, your case was actually handled appropriately, and here's what you need to know to understand that. And then to have some statistics that the program can put forward, or the Cadastro, the agency, can put forward to show that they are in fact receptive to complaints and doing a good job of handling them, and that although there will always be a few individuals or a few cases that can make headlines on some kind of allegation, true or false, that actually the accountability is quite high and that the averages are very strong for having dealt with things appropriately. So it's important to think about that back office as well as thinking about the front line in the grievance mechanisms. And to the question of how to deal with mobile populations, I don't know that we have a lot of codified experience yet, but I just speculate that this problem may become lesser as information technology moves on. So when we think about what do we really need an address for, why is it that every form I fill out, of the dozens I fill out related to my kids' schooling and their summer camps and their et cetera, and all their medical care has address on it? It's because it's taken as my second identifier. So I have my name and then I have my address, and between the two, that's supposed to identify me. That's one purpose. And the other purpose is that it gives agencies to whom I'm giving information a place to reach out to me. And that used to be done by physical address and paper mail. But I think increasingly, biometric ID is going to replace that first purpose, so that some kind of biometrics, I am who I am because I have a fingerprint or something on record, and that some other form of address that is electronic and can be mobile with the person, so a cell phone or an email address or something, may carry out that second function. Those sound a bit far-fetched when we think about some level of migrant populations, pastoralists in poor countries in some areas, but we know that with cell phone technology, huge swaths of population that 10 or 15 years ago we would never imagined will be covered in these things already are, and I think in another 5 or 10 years the problem will be a whole order of magnitude easier, and so the problem of dealing with migrant populations may change a lot, which will then mean that we have to think a little bit differently about how budget flows go. If people are migrating across, say, municipalities, the budget flow to handle them may not go to a fixed municipality. That budget flow may have to be as flexible as the location of the people. Thank you.
Great, very helpful. Thank you, Margaret. So we've almost kept to time. We've spilt over a little bit, but I'm not going to spend any more time. I think we've had a great presentation from Joana and some very insightful comments from Margaret. We were able to cover some of the questions that were provided, and very much hope that it's been a good session for everyone participating. We thank you for your time. So what's left for me is to thank both Joana and Margaret for participating, all the participants for joining and sharing your questions. It's been mentioned already, but for those of you who are interested in the presentation, then please send an email with your details to webinar@wwp.org.br. I know that there were a number of questions that were asked that we were not able to address, but I'd want to mention as well that there's a lot of information about the Cadastro Único and other aspects of Brazil's experience on the WWP website, including documents that go into many of the details that have been discussed in the presentation and some of the Q&A. So you can find that at www.wwp.org.br. And you will also, on the site, you can register for newsletters where you can receive information about new products coming out, as well as future webinars. So we hope to have webinars coming up fairly soon on conditionalities, Brazil's experience with conditionalities, Brazil's experience with M&E in relation to the Bolsa Familia program. So look out for that, and please join future events, and drop us a line if you have any suggestions or any comments on the event today. Thank you very much.